Hello, welcome to this Math Success Workshop. This is part 5, where we're going to be talking about how to study for math quizzes and math tests. All right, so question for you. How do you study for a math test? Do you study for a math test? Maybe that's a better question, right? Do you try to cram everything in the night before? And if you don't study at all, or if you just try to cram everything the night before, those are not really the best techniques you can be using to study for math, or really for any subject. So how can we make study time more valuable? That's what we'll be talking about in this short video here. All right, so let's see. Study techniques. First thing, keep your notes and your homework organized, right? And like I said, this is part 5 of this Math Success Workshop. In some of the previous parts, we talked about taking notes and doing homework. And one of the key things with taking notes was keeping the notes organized, right? So one of the reasons you want to keep your notes organized is so that when it comes time to study for a quiz or a test, you can find the information you need easily without wasting a lot of time and getting frustrated because you can't find what you're looking for, right? Same idea with your homework, right? Homework is a good source of material that you can use to study for a test, but it's only a good source if it's organized and you can find what you're looking for, right? So, if you're in a class where you have to turn in every homework assignment and your teacher gives them back to you, well, when your teacher gives them back, put them in a folder or put them in a binder or something and try to keep them in order so that, it's kind of like the story of what's going on in class, right? First, we started with this first homework assignment and then the second homework assignment, and it goes in order and it's organized, and it makes it a lot easier for you to find that stuff when it comes time to use it to help you study. All right, so again, keeping organized is a real important thing, especially in a math class, but really for any type of class, it's an important thing to be able to do. Another good thing about studying, or something you should do to help you study better, is to start early, right? Don't wait until the night before the test to begin studying, right? If you know a test is coming up, next Thursday, well, maybe start this weekend studying, maybe an hour on Sunday night and then maybe an hour on Monday night, and do a little bit here and there and kind of build yourself up so that by the time you get to that test on Thursday, you've already put in a bunch of hours of studying and you don't have to do it all the night before. Because when you try to study stuff, a lot of things, in one single night, what usually ends up happening is, one, you stress yourself out, right? Which doesn't help your mental abilities as far as remembering the information. And when you try to do too many things all at once, some of the stuff is going to stick, but some of it is not, right? It's just your mind can only take in so much information at one time. And if you try to study for a test, in one single night, a lot of times you just overwhelm your mind and you're not able to actually remember all the information you're trying to study. Right, so always a good idea to start early whenever possible. All right, so some actual studying techniques then. That's just some advice on things you should do to make studying easier for you. But what do you do when you actually study? Well, one thing is reviewing your notes and the examples from class. And if you looked at some of the other videos that I've done in this Math Success Workshop, when we did the one about notes, which I think was video number 2 in this series, the advice there was to review your notes each day after class, right? If you keep doing that, and the reason I told you then, in that video was, well, if you read your notes after class each day, you can clarify topics that were confusing. It reinforces the information that you learned in class, and now you have a better chance of remembering it. And then guess what? If you do that each day, if you review the notes each day and you reinforce the information and you remember it better, well, then when it comes time for the test, you already remember the information a little bit better because you've been reviewing those notes and those examples from class all along, right? If you do that every day, you're kind of building up that knowledge as you go, and then when you're sitting there the night before the test, you'll find that, hey, I already remember a lot of this stuff because I've been reviewing all along, right? Rather than waiting until that night before and you don't know anything and then trying to cram it all in one night. Like I said, that doesn't usually work. So review those notes and examples from class every single day after class. You build up that knowledge. You build up your confidence with the material in the class, and you're much more likely to do well on a quiz or a test. Another thing you can do to help study for a math test is to review the homework problems, right? Math classes, as far as studying is concerned, is a little bit different from some other classes. Like if you're studying for a history test, you're like trying to memorize people's names and trying to memorize dates that things happen and trying to memorize a storyline of what happened and when. If you're studying for an English test, you might be trying to remember the plot line of a book or something like that. Studying for a math test, though, you're not just trying to memorize things, right? Math is not about memorization. Sometimes that's part of it when you're like memorizing formulas and stuff like that, but it's not all just memorization, right? Math comes down to understanding, right? So one of the ways to help you understand is reviewing the notes and examples every day, reviewing the homework problems that you've already done. After you do the homework and if your teacher returns it to you, hold on to it. Don't just toss it in the garbage. Hold on to it and review it. Go over those problems again, right? Get that understanding of how to do the different types of problems. Understanding is really important to do well in math, right? Not just memorization. All right, and then with those examples from the notes, with those homework problems, redo them, right? Don't just read through them and try to memorize, okay, when I have this type of problem, it's step 1, step 2, step 3, and then I get the answer. Work out those problems again, right? Go back to those examples that you did in class. Look at the problem, write it down on a separate sheet of paper. Try to go through the steps yourself. Try to solve the problem. Check back in your notes to make sure you're doing it correctly. And if you're not, look back in the notes to see the right way to do it, and then maybe try again, right? Same thing with the homework problems, right? Don't just get back the homework and like stare at the page with your homework problems on it and just try to memorize all the stuff that's on there. Do the problems again. Right? The more times you do problems, the better understanding you're going to have of how to do problems, which means when you see them on the quizzes and tests, if you've done them a bunch of times already, you're going to know what to do on the quiz and the test. All right, so redoing those example problems and those homework problems is an important thing. Also, picking out more practice problems, right? In the video that I did on the textbook, textbooks have a whole bunch of problems in there that teachers usually don't ask you to do. They'll ask you to do some of those problems, but usually not all of them. Well, when it comes time for a quiz or a test, maybe you should go back to that textbook and the problems that you weren't asked to do, maybe do some of those just to practice some more. I don't know, I can't speak for every math teacher out there, but I know when I make quizzes and tests, a lot of times, like if I say, for a homework assignment, you have to do section 1.5, do numbers 7, 9, and 11. When I go to make the test, I go up to section 1.5 and I pick like number 8 or number 10 and I put that problem on the test, right? Because it's really similar to the ones that I asked you to do for homework, but it's a little bit different, so that's not like the exact same thing, right? And I know there are at least some other teachers out there that do that same type of thing. So if you do more of the problems that are in the textbook besides just the ones that your teacher asked you to do, you're getting more practice, you're building a deeper understanding of how to solve the problems. And there's also a chance that you're doing one of the problems that your teacher's actually going to put on the test or the quiz, which is just an added bonus there. Right? So the more problems you actually do, the better you're going to do on a math test. Right? Like I said a couple minutes ago, studying for a math test is not just memorizing formulas, memorizing problems and how to do the problems. The best way to study for math is to actually do the math problems over and over and over again. Right? The more times you repeat solving a certain type of problem, the better chance you have of remembering how to solve it when you sit down for a quiz or a test. Right? So doing the work, solving problems, best way to study for math. Right? If you do have things that you have to memorize, like formulas, flashcards is a way you can use, or a method you can use to help you memorize the formulas. On one side of the card, you write quadratic formula, and on the back of the card, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that can help you memorize those formulas. Like I said, most of math is not about memorizing, but sometimes there are things that you do need to memorize. So flashcards, if you've used those for other classes, maybe like for language classes in the past to memorize translations or definitions, it might help also with mathematics for those things you need to memorize. But flashcards shouldn't be the only thing you're doing when you're studying for a math quiz or a math test. Right? Remember, working on those problems is really the most important part of it. And then also, the last thing on here, devote several hours to study for a test. Right? Now, that doesn't mean several hours the night before the test. As we already talked about, that usually doesn't work out too well. Right? Like I said previously, I think I said, if I have a test coming up on Thursday, well, maybe I study for an hour on Sunday where I read over the first couple sections that are going to be on the test, and I go over that homework assignment, and maybe I work out a couple problems from those first couple sections. And then on Monday, I spend maybe one more hour where I go over the next section or two that's going to be on the test, and I read through those notes again, and I do a couple example problems from those homework assignments. And then I do that same thing each night. Tuesday night, Wednesday night, I study maybe an hour each night. And by the time I get to Wednesday night, I've already, throughout the beginning of the week, reviewed most of the stuff that I need to review. And then on that last night, I can just think about, well, of all that stuff that I did, is there anything that I still don't feel that comfortable with? And now I can go back and just focus on those problem areas, right? Whereas if you're trying to do everything the night before the test, you don't have that extra time at the end to kind of focus on what was really troublesome. It's just, I have to do everything tonight, so I just need to do it all. If you do it as you go along, a little bit each night, a little bit after class each day, reviewing the notes, going back over the homework problems, reviewing those. By the time you get to the test, or the night before the test, you really could just focus on those things that you feel like you need the most help with. And most of the other stuff you're probably going to understand pretty well, and you don't need to spend that much time on it. All right, so those are some study techniques for studying for a math or a math quiz or test. Remember, it's different than studying for some other types of classes. With math, it's really about just doing problems, right? The more example problems, the more practice problems you're able to do as you're preparing for a math quiz or a math test, the better off you're probably going to be when you sit down to take that test. All right, so that was studying for tests. The next video that we're going to do is how to seek help if you need help with your math class. All right, so check out that next video as well.